Hi, everyone. Welcome to another week. We hope that this live broadcast finds you well. If you're not checking us out live right now, that we hope that when you do get a chance to watch this, that you're doing well from wherever it is that you're connecting with us. So really excited to offer part 2 in the 5-part series. This week we'll be talking particularly about choosing the right digital channel for your message. There's a lot of channels out there, and I think that we have been forced in many ways with a sense of urgency to get out and get the message on particular channels. But today we're going to take a step back. We're going to go ahead and think about the why that drives the channels that we've been selecting, and we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons that some of the more popular channels offer, and I'm going to also offer a few pieces of advice and tips for those channels. But before we get to that, for those of you that are tuning in live right now, you're going to get to hear a little bit of a special announcement. So I posted this yesterday and it got some engagement, but for those of you who are watching live right now, I'm excited to let you know that starting at the end of this week, we will be releasing the first of hopefully what will be many interviews coming up. So I decided a couple weeks ago that when we were going to come to Facebook, that we were going to bring this community together, that we were going to find ways to create great conversations, and I stumbled upon the idea that I thought ultimately would best do this. So we have a show, and it's going to be releasing tomorrow morning with our first episode, and the show is called Keep the Conversation Going, and throughout the course of the year, we'll be interviewing all sorts of folks from a variety of backgrounds and industries, organizations, friends, and colleagues, and we'll be using it as a short format interview series. We'll be asking questions, and we'll be talking about how communication plays a role in what it is that they do and what it is that they're passionate about. So tomorrow morning, check back on the Facebook page for RPM, and you will see the very first of the interview series. The interview is going to be with a friend and a colleague, Katie Hurley, a registered nurse who's been on the front lines battling this COVID-19 virus, and she's going to share some stories and perspectives. So if you're watching live right now, you're really some of the first people to hear this, and we're excited to make that announcement. So if you are enthusiastic like we are about getting this show lifted and off the ground, we hope that you'll check it out. They will be posted on YouTube and on our Facebook page for you to watch, share, comment, and hopefully you may find yourself one day as a guest on Keep the Conversation Going. So as we mentioned, getting right to the content, we are going to today be talking particularly about the right channel that you should be using for whatever your message particularly is. Now, we understand that there are a lot of channels out there and it can be really hard. So we're going to try to cut through some of the noise today and take a step back and understand exactly what it is that the why might be that is driving your channel. So let's go ahead and we'll take a start at that, and we'll take a look. I see a lot of you chiming in right now and watching and liking. We've been getting a lot of great feedback on the page, so for those of you who have been supporting us, we're really grateful for that, and we look forward to seeing you continue to support that going forward. All right, so let's jump right in. For this week, we are talking about the right digital channel, and for many of you, you have found yourself on a variety of digital channels. In fact, one of the things that I often find that can be relatively frustrating for folks in these scenarios is there's a lot of channel choices out there, but oftentimes there's not a lot of discussion about why you should choose the channel that you've been given. So let's talk about that right now. When we select a digital channel, I've outlined 4 topics, concepts that we're going to quickly work through today, 4 decisions that you should be making. And if you look at my slide content here, you can see what each of those 4 decisions might be. So we're going to start, we're going to talk briefly about whether or not the content should be delivered synchronously, like we're doing right now, a live delivery, or it should be asynchronously produced and potentially produced in a way that will allow you to go back and to edit and to improve upon the content in a particular way. We're also going to talk a little bit about the audio and visual aspects. Do you need a video element? You might feel more comfortable on video. You might feel more comfortable on audio. So we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons associated with that. And then finally, we're going to dive into the public versus private debate. Now, I know that many of you have been reading about the Zoom bombings that have been going on. So I'm going to offer some tips on how you can avoid that. And if you haven't been victim to a Zoom bombing, we want to make sure that that never happens to you. And there are some really simple ways that we can avoid that. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. So let's start by first asking this important question. Do we need to have a live production? And what are the advantages of going live versus what are the advantages of having it be asynchronous? Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with computer-mediated communication terminology, asynchronous simply means that it's delayed, right? So if you think about it as being on demand, This gives you more time to produce your content. Now, as somebody who's been producing content both synchronously and asynchronously, there is a bit of a gift and a curse with this. When you're producing a video in an asynchronous fashion, it allows you all the time in the world to go back and to get it tuned up. But that is also the curse of it, because a lot of times we feel as if that we need to make sure that it's absolutely perfect. And in a world where content is moving so quickly, you may actually fall victim to trying too hard to get the content just right and potentially missing the window of opportunity to get that content out there in a timely fashion. On the other hand, if we produce in a live fashion, so if we go live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, for those of you who are gamers out there, you know that one of the nice parts is that it feels a little bit more natural when you're delivering. Now, it does mean that you're going to make mistakes. I've had a few word stumbles just already so far in our broadcast, but your audience tends to be a little bit more forgiving knowing that it's going to be a live broadcast. The next piece of this, and probably the most important piece of this from a communication standpoint, is thinking about whether or not you need live feedback. Now, as a professor for many years, one of the things that's great about standing in front of a room is that when you tell a joke or you make a compelling point and you get that feedback from the audience, it gives you a certain sense of confidence that you're connecting. Now, right now, I can see how many folks are watching. I can see the likes and comments coming in, but I definitely can't see your faces. And by not being able to see your faces, it's hard for me to garner whether or not I'm making a connection. Yet, if the content was being produced asynchronously, I would know that you would be watching it at a range of different times in a range of different locations. So one of the things you want to think about is, do you want your audience in the same place at the same time to consume your message? If you're running a meeting and you think it's compelling for that meeting to start at a particular time of day or a particular day of week, then certainly choosing the live option is the way to go. If you're running a meeting, but all you're trying to do is disseminate important information, but it doesn't matter when your team's going to watch it, go ahead and record that video in an asynchronous fashion and then release it at the time that you think it'll be more likely to be watched. So I want folks to start thinking more critically about whether or not it's important for the feedback to be live. I think sometimes we look at the first channel that's available to us and we go to it, but if we're not making a good decision about why we're choosing that channel, we may not necessarily get the results that we've been hoping for. So one last thing that I'll point out on this slide, as you can read here, PowerPoint with voiceover. So for those of you who are not comfortable producing live content and you're also not comfortable maybe using iMovie or producing a video series in that fashion, your PowerPoint systems on your computers right now can help you produce a slideshow with a voiceover. So if you go and do a Google search on that, you'll find that in the PowerPoint options, you can do a slideshow with a voiceover, and that will allow you to click through your slides and to provide a voiceover similar to what I'm doing right now, only live, and then record it. If you don't like it, you can do it again until you get it just right. And now maybe you have the best of both worlds of being able to bring your content to life with voice, but also having the ability to ensure that it sounds and looks just the way that you want it to. Up next, excuse me. Up next is the decision between audio versus audio and video, right? So we assume that all video has audio, but let's actually make that nuance clear. You can have video, images, a slideshow, if you will, and not have any audio, or you could have some audio that was just music. Now, why am I pointing this out? Well, for those of you who have produced video in the past, you know that it comes with some particular burdens. One, that when you edit it, you're not just editing the image, you're also editing the sound. We also know, and I'll talk about this in more detail in a second, that video files tend to be a lot larger. So if your message is relatively simple and straightforward, and it's not important for them to see your face, if it's not important for them to be able to see the manner in which you're delivering it, then we want to think about using audio more often. Again, going back to scenarios where you want to communicate a lot of information rather quickly and rather easily, audio can be a great format. For my instructors out there that may be watching, think about using audio to give feedback to your students, right? So one of the things that's probably happening right now is that we are very limited in our time, and certainly writing out, typing out a lot of feedback can be very time consuming. So you have a lot of options. You have your phone and you have your computer where you could run a simple audio recording. You could gather all of the feedback in one place, and that audio file more than likely can be easily sent through email, which is not necessarily true for video. Now think about this, video allows you to show and tell. And show and tell is a lot more compelling for many of us who are in sales or for many of us who are trying to market ourselves, our services, or our product. So if you find yourself in a situation where you are trying to put out something that you want people to be able to see or to feel, likely you're going to have to go with a video piece. Now, go back to that first question. Can your video piece be live like we're doing right now? Or can your video piece be potentially recorded? And if it can be recorded, it does give you the advantage to put little slides over the top of the content to be able to showcase in more detail what it is that you're talking about. Okay, so now we've talked about synchronous versus asynchronous. We've talked about the decision of whether we need audio and video. And with those decisions made, you're now going to be faced with some file conversion issues. For those of you right now who are Windows users, for those of you right now who are Mac users, I'm not going to go into detail on that because we could spend the rest of the day talking about the different file formats. What I do want to do is I want to draw your attention to some software that will likely make your life a whole lot easier. If you've been recording videos right now for work and you've been uploading them to YouTube, you may have seen that sometimes when you upload to YouTube, it goes really well and rather fast. And then for some of you, you may have found that your uploads get stalled. There may be situations where you've been trying to send an audio or a video file through your Gmail accounts, for example, and sometimes they get bounced back or sometimes they don't work. One of the issues that may be dealing with right now is the type of file that you're using. There's a great piece of software out there and it does cost a few bucks, so it's not relatively cheap, but for peace of mind and to save yourself a lot of time, and time is money, this program called Uniconverter does just about everything you could possibly imagine. So if you take a look at my screen right now, you'll actually see that you have the opportunity to convert both audio and video files. And when you drop them in here, you're actually going to have the opportunity to select not only the size of the file, or the target for the size of the file that you want, but you actually get to choose all of the different types of outputs that you could ask for. You can take a video and you could turn it just into an audio file, for example, if you wanted to. You can take your iMovie output and you can convert it to an MP4. And by converting it to MP4, it's much more likely that your YouTube upload is going to go a whole lot better. So again, I recognize that there's a few dollars involved in purchasing such a product, and this is not a paid promotion. But when time is precious, a program like this can ensure that your YouTube upload will go right the first time. So again, this is going to allow you to easily convert a file into any different format. For those of you who are thinking about doing audio files and wanting to bring them into podcast softwares, you're going to notice that a lot of the different podcast hosting places are going to require you to have different files, .waves, .mp3s. And this program will allow you to easily convert into the right format. So check this out. If you're doing a lot of audio recording, if you're doing a lot of video recording right now, and you're having problems with your uploads, Uniconverter could actually save you a lot of time and peace of mind. So let's jump into some of these really popular programs. Up on the screen here, my guess is that everyone recognizes at least most of these, and I want to quickly work through what their features are and when you might consider using them, or in some cases not using them at all. Let's start with Skype. Skype has probably been around in many ways for the longest in terms of being able to interact in a video conference manner. From what we know, Skype is likely the best for smaller conversations, one-to-one, or maybe at most 3 or 4 folks. Now, this is traditional Skype. For those of you who have Skype for business, I want you to be aware of something. When you invite somebody to be part of your call who's not in your organization, it can actually be really tricky for them to join your call. So for those of you with Skype for business right now, I want you to be aware that when you invite someone from outside of the organization, they may have a challenge getting in. And that may point you in the different direction to go ahead and use a different type of software. One of the things that's been great about Zoom over the last couple weeks is that it's so easily accessible. I believe their tagline at one point was, "It just works." And that's what's great about it. So Zoom allows just about anybody that has access to the link to be able to easily go ahead and join the meeting. And that's good as long as the people that have your link are the people who you want to have your link. So let's talk about this for a second. With programs like Zoom, we have to be really careful as to where we're sharing these links. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been on LinkedIn and I've been seeing a lot of entrepreneurs putting their content out there and getting excited to welcome people into their lives and into their homes to show them how they can help them. It's fantastic. With one problem, a lot of these meetings have been completely open door. And you wouldn't invite just anybody into your home, and you certainly wouldn't invite anybody to your organizational meetings throughout the course of the year. So we shouldn't be doing it just because we're now in a virtual space. The easiest way that we can make a few solutions here are: 1, make sure that you're always using a password protected meeting link. The next piece of this is to make sure that you're not openly sharing the link for your Zoom calls on social media. Have folks send you a message. It's a little bit more personal to invite them to the meeting that way anyways. And yes, it may take a couple extra minutes, but it ensures the person who's getting your link is somebody who you know is trusted to be in there. The other thing I might recommend is that if you're sending out a big Zoom call invite and there's a lot of people invited, you may want to wait until a little bit closer to the meeting to send that out. It actually lowers the risk of that email being forwarded to folks who you may not know, because anybody that has the link is going to be able to get in. Zoom did make some adjustments this week as a result of what's been going on. One of the adjustments that they made was that they turned off the share screen option for all of the members who were in the call. Now, I'm pointing that out here on my slide because I don't want it to be something that we make a mistake on and miss. In other words, in the preferences setting, when you go ahead and host a meeting, you have the option to allow folks in the meeting to share their screen. Now, if you know who's in the meeting, you can go ahead and turn that on. If you're doing an open call Zoom meeting, you should turn that off. As the host, it's probably best that you're the only person who can share their screen. Because if somebody gets into your meeting and you don't want them there, it's a lot easier to mute them than it will be to take the screen back from them. There are horror stories all over the internet for the last few days of this happening, and these are the ways that we can ultimately present this. So please take advantage of these tips and use them so you don't have something catastrophic happen during a really important meeting. Okay, so going back for a second, I just want to draw your attention to a few other sources that you might be using. One of them is Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is great for those of you who are in the team. Again, these work best when they're inter-organizational. So for those of you using Teams, you know lots about it. I just want to draw your attention when you're trying to collaborate or work with folks who are not on the team, it's going to be really challenging. And this is where a program like Webex may be a little bit more helpful. For those of you who have used Webex, you likely know what I'm about to say next. Webex is great once you get it to start working. Webex probably works best in a scenario where you have a lot of content to share and there's going to be opportunities for collaboration on the content that you're sharing. If for the most part you're just doing conversations, again, Skype and Zoom is probably the way to go, but Webex can be great for those advanced users. If you are a first-time user, or you're hosting a meeting for the first time, or you're joining a Webex meeting for the first time, I strongly recommend you play around with the program in advance. There are a lot of features, and when you use them correctly, they're awesome. But if you don't know how to use them, they can actually be really challenging and overwhelming. I'm going to get to YouTube and Facebook Live in just a moment. So we talked about what it is that we can do in regards to protecting our meeting. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other things that we can do. So let me go ahead and get my welcome screen turned off here. Live event. So I think it's kind of appropriate, right, that we're doing a live event and that just took place. So that is the scary part. If your content goes down, right, it can be really frustrating. So that is something to think about. Now, if you're going to use something that's live, I really kind of encourage you to make sure that you have a backup stream. So if we were to lose connection on our stream right now and you have a backup stream, the backup stream will immediately go into effect. One of the other things that I want you to consider if you're going to be using any of these live programs is understanding that you're going to be able to get feedback from your audience. But one of the things that could really help is if you have a producer, somebody in the room, or maybe somebody who's virtually, that you can share some time with them and be able to get them to do some of the responding on the comments in advance. For example, if you're making a presentation, a webinar, a sales pitch, and you have a colleague in your office or organization, you could actually have them working the back chat while you're making the presentation. This can be really helpful, especially in professional settings when you want to get a lot of information out there to folks and you don't necessarily have the ability to run the comments and to make the presentation itself. All right, let's go ahead and wrap these things up right now. So I want you to just think about some additional considerations. What are your resources? So what do you have access to? If you're in an organization that has maybe paid for access to Webex, paid for Skype for Business, you're more than likely to want to use those. But again, make some considerations as to what the resources are from the folks that you're trying to talk to. Think about your ability. In particular, think about where you feel most comfortable. Do you want to be on camera? Do you want to be able to make presentations like the ones that we're doing right now? If so, practice makes perfect. However, if you don't feel comfortable being on camera, for a lot of the content that you're producing, maybe you can get away with the PowerPoint with voiceover. Maybe you can get away with just producing the audio file and it can still be just as compelling, it can still be just as dynamic, and it can get the job done. Finally, I want you to think about timeliness and adaptability. One of the things I want folks to be careful of is if they're making a video recording or an audio recording, is when you put the date and you put the time in there, you are time stamping that piece. And by timestamping that piece, it may not be able to travel or carry as well into the future. So think about this. If you're making something inside of your organization, do you want to put your name on it if in the potential that you were to leave the organization, they may still want to use your piece? Do you want to date the piece by telling folks when it was produced? Now, there may be some things where that makes sense or it has to happen, but if you can get away with not timestamping your content, it really does open up opportunities for it to be used again, or at least slightly modified or edited for it to be used again in the future. All right, so as we look to wrap up here, some final things that we'll want to think about is coming back to our camera 2 for a second here now. So as we wrap up, like I was saying, I'm really excited for everybody that joined. I apologize for the technical difficulty in the middle. This has been a lot of fun producing these, and obviously there is a lot more content that we're going to have the chance to cover. Next week in part 3, we're going to be talking a little bit about online meetings in particular and some of the things that we can do for those. And then we'll have part 4 will be on video tutorials, and part 5 we're going to wrap it all up. As a reminder, keep the conversation going. This series starts tomorrow morning. We're really excited for it to drop. We're really excited for our future guests. If you or someone you know wants to get involved, wants to come on and do an interview, share their story, and share their perspectives on what's maybe going on, or talk a little bit about your business organization, we would be happy to have you here. I hope everybody stays safe. I hope you stay well. We wish you all the best, and we will see you all again real soon.